Hello and welcome to our brand new show here on the SABC News Channel, focusing on the stories, successes and trends from the African continent. This is Unwrap Africa, and we will be with you on air every Sunday from 8 to 8:30 as we cover all the developments from the African continent. As I said, not just limited to the news, but we're also looking at the color and the future development stories of Africa, what moves you as a continent. This is Unwrap Africa. Siyaqhaqha. Well, by the way, on the show, we also want to hear from you. You can send us your thoughts via video, or you could even text us from wherever you're watching from on the African continent. Tonight, we want to know what makes your country a place that should be unwrapped, a story that should be told in shaping the continent's future. Send us your thoughts by voice note. Our WhatsApp number 078-459-1897. We're also on Facebook. That's SABC Unwrap Africa. And on X, we are SABC News_TV. So then, as Africa is grappling with a number of challenges, the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture is an annual event, and it will be held again this month. Tanzania will host the much-anticipated dialogue, seen as a key platform to address the problems of the continent. Kylie Khumalo kicks us off.
Well, certainly it's that time of the year where it's all about really celebrating Africa, especially in this absolutely important month of May. As you know, that the Thabo Mbeki Lecture really synonymous with this particular time of the year, and it's being held in East Africa. But really, to talk more about the significance of the lecture, and really joining us now is Lucanio Nero. So once again, sir, thank you so much for your time. So we know that we've seen so many eminent people coming to South Africa. We saw you went to Guinea at some point where you had a lecture, but tell us about the significance in 2025.
Sure. When the foundation was formed in 2010, the foundation believed that it was very important that we commemorate and recognize Africa Day. And so every year since 2010, we've had a significant celebration of the Africa Day lecture, through the Africa Day lecture. And this year we're going to East Africa, to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And Tanzania plays a very critical role in the very heart of Pan-Africanism, ranging from the likes of Mwalimu Nyerere, who really were at the forefront of this movement, to today Benjamin Mkapa, Gertrude Mongela, people who've really shaped this Pan-African movement. And so for us as a foundation, we believe it was important to go to the heart of Pan-Africanism, bring our Africa Day lecture there in the true spirit of African Renaissance. And as you said earlier on, we took our Africa Day lecture to Guinea-Conakry 2 years ago. We've made a commitment as a foundation to rotate the lecture right across the continent. This year, East Africa, and next year, we're going to North Africa.
Look, obviously the lecture comes at a critical time for Africa, where we face a myriad of challenges, and obviously with these lectures and seminars, it's all about really trying to advance the African cause in terms of dealing with instability, issues of economic development. I would imagine also this year again, we're going to see quite a very similar approach in this regard.
Certainly. The broad theme shaping the lecture this year is the state of the continent and how do we reignite the African Renaissance. One of the key things the foundation has resolved beginning this year is how do we reignite the African Renaissance movement right across the continent. You're quite correct. The whole spate of geopolitical concerns right across the world, our own internal insecurity and instability, slow growth, high debt, high unemployment right across the continent is really causing us to re-examine where we find ourselves.
Thank you so much for your time. So we won't really just let the cat out of the bag yet, but certainly it's bound to be very interesting, riveting really conversation in the African continent. Kylie Khumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Let's go to Sudan now, and SABC News correspondent Naba Muhyiddin, who's watching the latest from Khartoum. Naba, good to see you. What's happening there tonight?
Actually, the situation in Khartoum is calmer after the military recontrolled the capital of Khartoum in May 2026. In March 2026. In March 26 of this year, and but now fighting is escalating in Port Sudan City, the de facto capital in eastern parts of the country, which is in the Red Sea and very close to Saudi Arabia. Drone attacks continue for this 8th day consecutively. Drone attacks is threatening the livelihood of, we can say, hundreds of thousands of people who are staying in Port Sudan. It was a safe haven for a long time that joins a homeland for hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Fuel tanks, main fuel tanks, and also main power plants were targeted by drone attacks. And actually, while I'm speaking to you right now, I can hear the anti-aircraft weapons in the sky of the de facto capital. So tension is escalating, and there is also some scenarios of an open escalation and a proxy war. The Red Sea is a strategic location for many countries, including Russia, United States, China, France, and many countries. So the situation right now is concerning for families who are staying in Port Sudan, and also for the de facto government in Port Sudan that is, of course, warning of a further escalation in all parts of the country.
Muhyiddin, live for Unwrap Africa from Khartoum, Sudan tonight. And if you're just joining us, this is a brand new program on the SABC News Channel, Unwrap Africa, focused exclusively to issues or on issues affecting the continent. The aim is to bring you a comprehensive look at the diversity and evolving landscape of Africa. And to help us do that, none better than SABC News Unwrap Africa editor Sophie Mugwena with me on set this evening. Sophie, good to see you. An exciting day for us. We're finally on the air with this program, and no shortage of things going on, even in North Africa, quite a lot of movement.
Africa, my home, my continent. And I think we are trying to do just that. We are Africans. We want Africans to tell their story. It's not only doom and gloom on the continent. When you look in the North Africa, you will realize that there's a lot. It's not only the wars in Sudan and South Sudan, but you have Egypt that's doing well. And we see a number of tourists from the globe visiting the pyramids. You go to countries such as Morocco, a melting pot of culture just near Europe, lots of tourists, the #1 destination for tourists on the continent. So there's a lot.
Yeah, right. And I'm listening to you, and one can't help but be excited because it's a continent that is thriving and growing despite its many challenges.
Of course, it is. And with its resources, when you go to regions such as the West Africa, you know that much as there's tension there in West Africa, where you have the Sahel region, the 3 countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, not seeing eye to eye with the ECOWAS, the regional body, and having started their own regional or perhaps a group. But a lot is happening, lots of changes in Burkina Faso. We saw Ibrahim Traore in Russia, well received, and people around the world, Africans in the diaspora, responding to his leadership, even though there are criticism. But it looks like those countries are saying we are going to use our resources to build our respective countries.
It's also an interesting time when you move on to the DRC, for instance. We know the SADC troops have finally started to withdraw. The Qataris had also tried to mediate a sort of ceasefire. Is it holding? Is there peace finally in the DRC?
Well, I think we're getting there. It's unfortunate that it had to be the Americans who are able to bring together President Felix Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame in terms of the foreign ministers meeting in Washington. But I think the DRC, with its resources, if the country can be stable, that country can feed the entire continent. When you look at the Inga Dam, it can provide electricity to the entire entire continent as well. Similarly, working with Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, the Renaissance Dam,
Right.
we can get lots and lots of electricity in terms of the hydroelectric power, and therefore there's a glimmer of hope, and let's hope Africans will ensure that there's peace in the Great Lakes region, because that region is truly, truly blessed.
And just as we're talking about the DRC, we're able to go live, in fact, now to the DRC. We've got another SABC correspondent standing by for us, Chris Okamaringa, standing by in Kinshasa. Chris, welcome to Unwrap Africa. What can you tell us from the DRC tonight?
Well, the DRC is still going through a conflict in the east of the country, despite a ceasefire deal that was signed last month between the government and the M23 rebels. Many people have been fleeing their homes as the rebels advance to other areas. Recently, we heard one of the senior officers of the M23 rebel group issuing an ultimatum, 7-day ultimatum, to Congolese troops and the militia that is fighting alongside them, known as Wazalendo, to lay down their arms and surrender, or else they will be pursued and killed. So there's a lot of tension. People in Eastern DRC and the rest of the DRC were hoping that with the entry of the United States and Qatar, that the two sides will come to the negotiating table and respect the ceasefire that was signed last month. But unfortunately, the fighting has continued. It's a very tough situation for many people there, and the DRC government is saying they're continuing to show the goodwill to try and follow what the United States has called the Declaration of Principles, and they hope to sign a deal in June. But there are very many people in the DRC who have been warning the president not to sign this deal without consulting them, because this is a very serious issue. It involves a minerals for security deal between the US and the DRC. So they want people to be consulted and a consensus to be reached before this very important decision is taken.
Chris Okamaringa, live for us in Kinshasa in DR Congo. Thank you. We continue our conversation now with Unwrap Africa editor Sophie Mukwena, still with me here in studio. We've touched on the DRC. I want us to go to Central Africa now, Sophie. Gabon, elections there as well. Let's talk about the significance of the country in terms of the picture in the region and what we expect will be the road ahead.
Well, of course, it's an oil-rich country, similarly to countries such as Nigeria, Angola in the southern region. And therefore, I think of interest, that is why the Americans are interested in Gabon. It's because of the oil. And I think it's a very strategic country in terms of countries that are looking for alternative supply of oil, and Gabon can come very handy. But I think many people are asking whether the dynasty, it's just a dynasty. Yes, a coup by the same person who's now the president, who is a relative to the president who was removed from power, and therefore dynasty continue.
In 5 seconds, big sports weekend for us here in Southern Africa. Big one in Durban yesterday, Kaizer Chiefs beat Orlando Pirates. Does your dress give us an idea of where your personal allegiance goes?
Must I?
Who were you rooting for?
I like peace, man. I really do like peace.
You don't have a favorite?
I like peace. Yes,
Okay.
of course, a big one. On the continent, people were watching, and these two teams have strong following on the continent. I saw many people in Nigeria in particular saying that why can't we do the same with our boys and girls here in Nigeria? Many countries saying the same. You saw the people not only in the stadium but also outside. You saw the students at different institutions of higher learning after the match, how excited they were. And I think it's good for South Africa, it's good for sports, but also on the athletic side, our boys in China, oh boy.
Akani and the team doing very well.
Did very well. But lastly, bad news, Afrikaners living, I'm sure we have those visuals at the airport. Our colleague is there trying to catch a glimpse of the plane living. We are told 49 of white Afrikaners going to America. They are going to be refugees there. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's not all doom and gloom. I guess you have a good guest coming.
It's a story that we will be tracking, of course, here on Unwrap Africa and the other SABC shows. Much more still ahead for you, including a conversation with entrepreneur Sizwe Nxasana, leader of the Future Nations group of schools. Stay with us. And as we launch the first edition of Unwrap Africa here on SABC News, what better way to do that than to speak to entrepreneur, philanthropist and a leader in every respect, Mr. Sizwe Nxasana, currently at the helm of Future Nation Schools, an important issue when you consider Africa's commitment to improving education levels, not just in our country, but also the broader continent. Mr. Nxasana, good to have you with us on Unwrap Africa.
No, thanks very much for having me.
You know, I was going through everything that you've done. You've moved multiple times in your career and you've led in various industries. But how does a young man from Lamontville, Newcastle, get that right?
Well, it has a lot to do with the foundations. So when I was young, 3-4 years old, my father moved the family to Lesotho, and I ended up in a boarding school when I was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of knowing and getting training about resilience, about how other people in other places live, as opposed to just growing in Newcastle or in Lamontville. So, and as I continued on our journey, my mother was a really great mother, very strong mother, focused on education for all of us. There were 7 of us, and I'm right bang in the middle as number 4. So, you know, it's about how families play roles in our lives in developing us as people. And in the African context, family is not just your nucleus family, because there are aunts or baba and the mothers and so on, who are all contributors to how you become.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you embody, I suppose, in a sense, you know, the African Renaissance that everyone used to speak about 15, 20 years ago. You look at how you've moved. Telkom, first round you were there, you eventually moved into the education space and eventually opened a group of schools. What informed that boldness?
Well, when I was young, in my 20s, in fact, I must go back a little bit, because when I finished school, I didn't have a job. I ended up working as a factory worker, you know, in a clothing factory. After that, I got a scholarship to be trained as a land surveyor. Mm-hmm. But before I could actually go to university for training, they sent me out to a very deep part of Zululand, and we were building roads and infrastructure, and I was a construction worker. And I remember living in this construction shack and journaling every day about my life, what I was thinking, what my life was going to be like. And this is also where I decided I wasn't going to pursue my studies in land surveying, as an example. I decided to go to Fort Hare to do commerce. And when I arrived at Fort Hare University in the Eastern Cape in 1976, was the first year that Professor Wiseman Kuhlu qualified as a chartered accountant.
One of your great inspirations.
I didn't know anything about chartered accountancy, so I decided to pursue that route. So my first chapter was actually opening Sizwe & Company, which is today Sizwe Nsaluba Kobodo Grant Thornton, fifth largest.
Company, correct?
Yes, audit company, which is now the 5th largest audit firm in South Africa, actually. And I promised myself when I started the firm that I would only be in one sector for no longer than 10 years. It was a very arbitrary thing, but even today I sort of live my life according to that motto that, you know, I'll develop myself, I will make a contribution in that industry, and 10 years is a time frame where I'll spend in that industry, you know, and then move to the next. So that's why I've moved from accounting and auditing to telecoms to banking, and I'm now in education.
And 2017 is when Future Nations School, the idea came to life.
Correct.
What informed that, in particular, the emphasis that you've put on infusing African elements into the teaching and learning?
Well, I didn't just create Future Nation Schools. In 2017, I actually created 4 companies, all in education. And they were solving particular problems. So we have Future Nation Schools, and the whole idea of Future Nation Schools as a school that focuses on Afrocentricity, integration of technology, and really building confidence in our children about who they are and the contribution they can make in the world, and solving problems and so on is really important. But in addition to that, I created Sfiso Education Technology as an education technology company. Also created Future Nation College for teacher training. So the problems I wanted to solve was, one, how our children taught and prepared for life, especially given the context of us as Africa, because when you look at the African continent, it's often divided into Anglophone Africa, Lusophone, and Francophone Africa. We have almost 1.5 billion people in the continent, and the legacy of colonialism still affects how our children are taught in the classroom every day, right? So I wanted to solve that problem. Also created a publishing company to focus particularly on developing content in indigenous languages and indigenous stories.
Right.
Because we need a lot more of that. So that's the first thing. One, Afrocentricity is about how do we teach our children about who they are, using the African context in every situation of learning and teaching, from preschool all the way up to the 12th.
And how do you do it, Mr. Ngasana, in a world that is increasingly globalized, where what is Western dominates what we consume even in the media?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things that are really important in this regard. For starters, the issue of language is really, really important in terms of transmission of knowledge, as well as the skills and competencies. So in our schools, at Future Nation Schools, we encourage what has now become important in the context of South Africa, which is mother tongue-based bilingual education. So we encourage that in our classrooms. So yes, our language of learning and teaching may be English, but our teachers are encouraged, one, to explore and inquire, involving the students, Afrocentricity in all its different forms, whether you're teaching geography, history, mathematics, and so on, is really, really important. Because if children understand the concepts, whatever concepts they're being taught in their mother tongue, they're more likely to understand deeply, some of the especially abstract concepts that you find in education. The second thing is the methodology of teaching. So we use what we call problem or project-based learning, PBL, in our schools, from preschool all the way up to grade 12. And that is about allowing young people to explore, to inquire, to develop their skills for communication, critical thinking, problem solving, and all of those skills and competencies that are really important to prepare them for life. And thirdly, the integration of technology in the African context. We all talk about the importance of artificial intelligence as an example. So in our schools, we don't just use technology, but we get the young people to explore how to create a lot of different things using technology. So we teach AI, we're developing curriculum for artificial intelligence in schools as we speak. We teach other schools now, public schools, in coding and robotics as an example. We integrate technology, so our teachers are trained every day in terms of how technology is used in the classroom. And those are all very important aspects in developing these skills and competences.
And lastly, as we end, you're now going to expand into other parts of the African continent. How's that going to be rolled out?
So the most important thing is understanding the ability of technology to scale our operation. So we started our teacher college as an example. We have a number of really important courses that are focusing on those areas that Africa is endowed with. As an example, technology obviously is very, very important. That's why we have a lot of courses for teachers today, because teachers are mediators of learning. So we are able to offer that in any country, especially the English-speaking countries in the continent. Areas in technology, as an example. Secondly, entrepreneurship. Thirdly, focusing on areas like agriculture and just energy transition or renewable energy, as an example.
And are you opening a school in Rwanda, is it?
So in Rwanda, we're working with government. So I serve on the board of Carnegie Mellon University Africa in Rwanda, but I've also had a lot of engagements and discussions, for instance, with the Ministry of Education around areas such as technology, as an example. How are we training our teachers to embrace technology, use it in the classroom for imparting knowledge, skills, and competencies, as an example. So, yes, so I'm working in those areas.
And we will see you at the launch of those projects that are coming up in Rwanda. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Sizwe Masana, the man at the helm of not just Future Nation Schools, but all the other entities that he's launched, especially from that around the period of about 2017. This is Unwrap Africa. Well, almost at the end of our time together, but before we go, we did ask you right at the beginning, what makes your country a place that should be unwrapped in shaping Africa's future? And some of those comments have already come in. I'm hoping we can bring them up. There it is, one of them here from Kenya Unchained says, I'm proud to be African because I carry the legacy of resistance of Lumumba, Nyerere, Biko and Wangari Maathai. Our ancestors fought for freedom. It's our duty to finish what they started. A united, sovereign Africa is the goal. Time for one more. Balisa says the strength and perseverance of African people, particularly in the face of adversity. The day is very significant and I celebrate it with pride. That's Africa Day, not only because of the resilient spirit of African people, but because the 25th is also Balisa's birthday. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers as well who are watching tonight. Our thanks to all of you watching this first ever edition of Unwrap Africa. We're back with you next week, 8 until 8:30 on Sunday. Thank you for watching.